Titans fall 34-17 in Houston on Monday Night Football. Just their second loss on Monday Night Football in the last like 10 years or something like that. They had been very good in those games. They won the game in Dallas earlier in the month that really made you feel like, okay, now the season's back on track if they can take care of business. And they did it against the Patriots, but then back-to-back division games on the road, Indianapolis and Houston, did not go well, and now their backs are very, very much against the wall. We'll see how they respond. Phone lines are still open. 737-7767 is the number. Kenny, we appreciate you waiting through the break. You're next up here on Sportsline.
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead, Kenny. You're on the air.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I agree with you on the New England thing. You should let the team win the ball game, not the coach calling it out. And they had a chance to draft Lamar Jackson because they had two good quarterbacks, which confused the other team, and they didn't do that, and I don't know why. I'll hang up and listen, okay?
All right. Thanks, Kenny. Appreciate the call. I mean, here's the thing. You have to look at what John Robinson, the general manager's done with this team. And when he took over in year one, he deserved all of the credit he got. The trade for DeMarco Murray, where he basically gave up nothing to bring in a guy who led the AFC in rushing that year. He gave up Dorial Green-Beckham to get Dennis Kelly, who's been a very valuable offensive line piece for the Titans over the last few years. They built a team from the inside out. They won in the trenches with that, and the moves he made in year one helped us go from a roster that was near the bottom of the league, maybe the worst roster, I think it was the worst roster in the league, to a team that won 9 games. But I think in some ways that was fool's gold as well, because the Titans were basically injury-free, as much as I've ever seen from a professional football team that year. And they had a ton of guys have career-type years. I mean, think about it. Henry led the AFC rushing that year. Last year, he had half of that in the rushing game. That's one guy. I'm sorry, DeMarco Murray in that. Derrick Henry had half of that. They had guys outperform what they probably were a few years ago. And what happened because of that is there was maybe a overvaluing of what the roster actually looks like. And, you know, the Titans' offensive line in that season was one of the top 3 in the NFL. The belief was that with all of them back, they'd be one of the top 3 in the NFL last year. They clearly were not. There were signs there that there was a chink in the armor in the interior of the offensive line. But what happened? They go to the offseason after going to the playoffs again, and they bring the line back intact. And a lot of people still pointed to 2 years ago and said, this line should be one of the best in the league. I thought that was silly because you saw the chink last year in the interior and you didn't do anything to upgrade it. This is a league where you have to constantly evolve, and John Robinson did not. And it's the same thing on the defensive side of the ball. They've gotten a little old over there, especially up front. The outside linebackers, Arakpo and Morgan, looked slow last night. They haven't done anything to really fix those positions. And so now all of a sudden, where this team was so strong in the trenches, they aren't anymore. And that is a big reason why they aren't running the ball effectively and they're not stopping the run anymore. 281 yards allowed on the ground last night against the Texans. Back to the phones. Say hello to Wayne. Wayne, good evening.
Yeah, good evening. I appreciate the time.
You bet.
Yeah, I watched the game last night, and of course they say that football is a game of momentum. But the thing that I noticed, it seemed like when something goes the other way, they lose focus, and then it just starts to unravel. And my question is, it's not the play calls, it's not the offensive line, it certainly isn't Marcus Mariota because they chased him all over the field and he had a record night. I think what it is, if you remember 20 years ago when the Houston Oilers came to Nashville, they were hungry, and they were 1 yard away from winning the world championship. And the question I have is, over the last 20 years, how come they haven't progressed? And when they came to Nashville, they had to win to stay here. So it's like I said, I feel for the football players, but I'm just trying to find out what is the one common denominator, and I think what it is momentum. They lack momentum.
Yeah, certainly momentum plays a factor in the games, Wayne. The biggest thing I think with this team is that they've sort of lost their edge. They've lost the toughness in the trenches or whatever it is. And you're right. I mean, when games have gone against them the last 2 weeks in Indianapolis and Houston, they've had no answers. And this is a team that has made itself sort of its mark over the last few years when they've won games, that they were resilient. You know, Marcus Mariota's been great at fourth quarter comebacks. They've been good when down in games, all those sort of things. Good when their backs are against the wall or people are counting them out. But the last couple of weeks, when things flipped on them or there was a turnover or a momentum shift in the game, they've had no answers. Wayne, we appreciate the call. Let's move on here. Say hello to Lisa. Lisa, good evening.
Good evening. Yes, what I was going to say was basically answered by the last two callers and your comments. How does a team start off strong, and then the more they play in the season, the more they regress? Most teams, if they start off bad, they either stay bad or they improve. But the Titans seem to start off good and then regress as they go along. And it just boggles my mind how that happens.
Yeah, I'm not so sure they've regressed. I mean, the offensive numbers have certainly improved over the last several weeks. I think other teams have gotten better. Like, for example, Indianapolis started the year really poorly. Houston, too, for that matter. They were 0-3, and now they've clicked and put it all together and have run off 8 straight. Indianapolis has won 5 in a row at this point to get to 6-5. So I think it may just be that other teams have gotten better while the Titans have not, as much as you would like to see at this point of the season, Lisa. The big thing for me, though, is that when I look at this, and we praised the coaching staff in the first month of the season, and I think rightfully so. When they were injured, they were coming up with creative ways in the game plan to put them in the best position to win, and miraculously, through smoke and mirrors, they were 3-1 after the first month of the season. At that point, they started to get a bit more healthy, and so now this is what the team really should look like at this point. And it doesn't seem like they have that in them anymore. It doesn't seem like the creativity is there in the same way. It doesn't seem like the game plans have been as good. And the results have not been good on either side of the ball here. And now you're looking at a 5-6 football team.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, Lisa, thanks so much. We appreciate the call. Let's say hello to Bobby. Bobby, what's up?
Hey, thank you for taking my call.
You bet.
They showed one picture of Mariota sitting on the bench, and it was in the fourth quarter, and he looked like he was so mad he could bite nails in two.
Sure.
And another thing is, Mariota was better last night than I've seen him in ages as far as his completions. And they kept going, they kept running the football in the third and fourth quarter. How long does it take to see that Mariota was on the ball? He was hitting everything last night.
Yeah, he also got sacked 6 times and hit a bunch more, though. So to some degree, they had to run the football to try to get those pass rushers who are so good, who were pinning their ears back, try to get them to slow down just a little bit so they didn't get the quarterback killed.
Well, here's another thing. The other team was getting points on the first and second down, and then by throwing the ball, and then when they got to the third down, they would run the ball maybe.
Sure. They definitely did a good job, and I appreciate the call, Bobby. They definitely did a good job of staying in front of the chains last night. I'll say this. For all the people who want to make it always about Marcus Mariota, I've said for a while, he's not the problem for this team. Marcus Mariota is not the problem. Is he Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers or Drew Brees? No, he's not. But he is a plenty good quarterback to win in the league and to lead you to wins. He's got 10 game-winning drives in the fourth quarter and overtime since the start of last season. Since the start of last season, he's done that. That's a guy that you can win with, but you have to surround him with talent. He's not going to win it by himself. And last night was a good example. He was great. No one else on the team was. And you lose by 17 points. So it's not all about the quarterback at all times. And if you look at it, since the game in London, since the game against the Chargers, Mariota's been really good. Not a great game in Indianapolis, and of course he got knocked from the game, so you didn't even get to see him for much of it. But in the 4 games he's played the full time, he's been really good for the Titans in those games. And yet they're 2-2, 2-3 if you count the Indy game they got knocked out of. That tells me that the problem is around him. It's the roster. It's the talent up front. It's the skill position players. And yes, it's the defense not getting the job done. Remember, this is a team that led the NFL in scoring defense 2 weeks ago, giving up 17 points a game, 38, 34 respectively the last 2 weeks. That is not going to get it done. Let's say hello to Karen. Karen, good evening. You're next up here on Sportsline.
Hi. A few years ago, when Ken Wisenhunt was fired, they had the little press conference to introduce Mike Mularkey as the interim head coach. Mm-hmm. And they said at that time that they wanted a head coach who had prior experience as a head coach. So Mike Mularkey was, made the interim head coach.
Yep.
And I think he did a great job. And, we went to the playoffs. We won a game. We had back-to-back winning seasons. And then he was fired. Mm-hmm. And to this day, I don't know why. I've never heard the reason.
Well, Karen, real quickly, I mean, essentially the reason was John Robinson and, to a degree, Amy Adams-Strunk didn't like the direction of the offense last year. They thought it was stale. They thought it didn't live up to the expectations, and they thought that Marcus Mariota wasn't taking strides as a franchise quarterback. And so they basically told Mike Mularkey that he needed to make changes, starting with firing Terry Robisky, the offensive coordinator, and allow some new innovative person to come in and try to open up the offense to get the most out of them. And Mularkey said, this is the way we play football. This is how I coach. Essentially, I'm not making changes. If you want to do that, you got to fire me. And so they did. They moved on from a guy who was, in some ways, stubborn about not evolving because they wanted to evolve. But they haven't evolved in a good way so far this year. There's no question.
And here's my point. Back then, they said they wanted someone with prior head coaching experience.
Yeah.
But then when Mike Mularkey was fired, they brought in a guy that had 0 head coaching experience, Mike Vrabel.
Sure.
And personally, I think the man, nothing personal, he seems like a nice guy, a good person, but I think he's way in over his head. Just based on what I've seen, the calls that are made at crucial times of the games that didn't pan out. And, there's an expression, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. We were not broke. We were headed in the right direction. I mean, and, it's ridiculous that John Robinson got up there and said, we want to go in a different direction. We made the playoffs. We had back-to-back winning seasons. We won a playoff game against the Chiefs. We got, killed by the Patriots, but so did everybody else. And, I don't understand. What different direction do you want to go in? I mean, look at what happened, and I feel like, Coach Mularkey, and I might be the only Titans fan in Nashville that feels this way, but I feel like the man got stabbed in the back, and I don't like the way they treated him. And then they bring in a guy with 0 head coaching experience after, a couple of years ago that was a priority, that it was important that the interim head coach had, prior experience as a head coach. And then, after all that, and then they bring in a guy with 0 head coaching experience. And I'm sorry, but I think the man is way in over his head. I don't think he's a good coach. I know it's not all his fault. It's not always on the coach. It's not always on the players. But I'm just saying, based on what I've seen, and I hope I'm proven wrong because I know we have 5 more games left, but that's my comment. I think they did Mike Mularkey wrong. I think he did a good job, and I think they screwed up. And John Robinson said, we want to go in a different direction. Well, my point is, we were going in the right direction, and now we're going in the wrong direction, and we're so inconsistent. It's very frustrating because you get all excited, when we beat the Patriots,
yep.
and then the very next week, it's ridiculous because you don't know which Titans team is going to show up. And when we had Mike Mularkey, they were fairly consistent, and they played hard for Mike Mularkey, and that's just my comment.
Yeah, Karen, I really appreciate the call. Good stuff, and I don't think you're alone in that at all. I will say this. Mike Mularkey's teams are plenty inconsistent. They lost last year in Miami. They lost to San Francisco. They lost to Arizona. They were plenty inconsistent in their own right, but they won 9 games each year. They won a playoff game last year. So your point is well taken in that it is very rare that you see a team that made the playoffs and win a game fire their coaching staff. And that's what happened here, because they thought the only way to move up was to do that and bring in a more innovative head coach and a more innovative offense. Well, the goal you're trying to hit when you're in the playoffs and you win a game and you fire your coach, it's up here. And the window is very small. And it's not to say Mike Vrabel and the staff will never get there, but they sure don't appear to be doing it right at this second. And that is the issue. And I said it at the time because of that exact thing. I said, you're trying to hit a very small bullseye by making this move. And what's happening here is John Robinson is setting himself on the clock. Up until that point, everything he'd done, it was hard to question. But now he's made the move, and it's not clear the Titans are better. And now his guy's in the head seat on the coaching sideline, and the roster is pretty much completely his. And it's not clear they're getting better at this exact moment. So at the end of the season, if they don't have a miraculous turnaround, John Robinson's going to have to look in the mirror and then look long and hard at the roster he created. Because now he's got his head coach. He's going to have to look long and hard at the roster he created and figure out how to fix it. We got to take a break. We'll be back after this.